I always thought that if my heart finally gave out, it would be quiet. Instead, it happened in front of 3,000 people while I was reaching for a diploma. One minute I was standing, and the next the floor rushed up to meet me. When I finally woke up, the doctors told me they had called my parents hours ago, but the only face hovering over my hospital bed, looking terrified and furious, was my grandfather. The flutter in my chest felt like a moth trapped inside a paper lantern, beating its wings against my ribs in a frantic, soft rhythm that had become my constant companion for the last 6 months. I pressed the palm of my hand against my sternum, right over the silk of my blouse, and waited for it to stop. It was just stress. That was what I told myself every morning when the room tilted slightly to the left, and it was what I told myself every night when I lay in bed, too exhausted to sleep, listening to the rushing sound of my own blood in my ears. I was 33 years old. I was not the kind of person who had medical emergencies. I was the kind of person who had 5-year plans, color-coded calendars, and a full-time job in supply chain logistics that I balanced alongside a graduate program at the Ridgeway Institute of Health and Management. I was efficient, I was durable, I was fine. You have to be fine when you are the one holding everything together. The morning of my graduation was bright. The kind of aggressive, high-contrast sunlight that makes the edges of the world look sharp and unforgiving. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in my small apartment, pinning the heavy velvet hood of my regalia into place. My face looked pale. The skin pulled tight over my cheekbones, but I applied a second layer of blush and practiced my smile. It was a good smile. It was the smile of a woman who had spent 4 years writing papers until 2 a.m. and waking up at 6 to manage shipping manifests for international freighters. I checked my phone. No new messages. My parents had said they would be there. They had made a production of it. Actually, my mother had asked for the ticket information 3 separate times, complaining about the digital interface of the university website, and my father had made a joke about finally getting a return on their investment. Even though I had paid for this degree entirely out of my own pocket, I checked the time. It was 8:40 in the morning. The ceremony started at 9:30. They were probably just driving. The traffic coming into Ridgeway from the suburbs could be unpredictable. I grabbed my keys, swallowed 2 ibuprofen to dull the headache blooming behind my left eye, and walked out the door. The floor dipped under my feet, just for a second, like the building was settling into the earth. I grabbed the doorframe to steady myself. Just stress. I thought, just get through the walk across the stage. Just get the paper. Then you can sleep for a week. The Ridgeway Arena was a cavernous space filled with the low roar of 3,000 people. The air conditioning was blasting, but the humidity from the bodies pressed together made the air feel thick and recycled. I found my place in the line of graduates, adjusting my cap, nodding politely to the classmates I had spent years studying with but hardly knew. We were a cohort of adults, mostly professionals going back for advanced degrees. So the energy wasn't raucous like an undergraduate ceremony. It was a tired, grim satisfaction. We had survived. As the procession began, the organ music vibrating through the floorboards, I scanned the audience. The seating chart was burned into my mind. Section G, Row 4, Seats 12 and 13. I walked down the center aisle, my heels clicking on the concrete, and kept my eyes fixed on Section G. Seat 12 was empty. Seat 13 was empty. The disappointment hit me first. A cold wash of familiarity that I instantly shoved down. They were late, that was all. My father was terrible with directions, and my mother likely had trouble deciding on shoes. They would slip in during the opening remarks, flustered and whispering, and I would see them waving from the middle distance. I took my seat in the front row of the graduates. The ceremony droned on. The dean of the institute spoke about leadership, about resilience, about the changing landscape of modern healthcare and management. I tried to listen, but the roaring in my ears was getting louder. It sounded like the ocean, or like a train approaching from a great distance. I looked back at Section G, still empty. A small, acidic knot of worry tightened in my stomach. What if something had actually happened? What if there had been an accident? My parents were difficult people, self-absorbed and chaotic. But they wouldn't miss this without a reason. They loved the optics of success too much to miss a chance to take a photo of their daughter. The master of science. The dean began calling names. I stood up when it was my turn for the row to rise. The movement made the world swim. Black spots danced in the corners of my vision. Little voids eating away at the light. I blinked hard, forcing them away. Claire Coleman. I told myself, walk, shake the hand, take the diploma, walk off, do not make a scene. I moved toward the stairs. The wood looked far away. I focused on the railing. I could feel the sweat trickling down my spine under the heavy gown. Claire Louise Coleman. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. It sounded distorted, like he was speaking underwater. I stepped up. 1, 2, 3 steps. I was on the stage. The lights were blindingly bright, searing into my retinas. I saw the dean smiling, holding out the leather-bound folder. I saw his hand extended. I reached out. My arm felt incredibly heavy, as if it were made of lead. I have to apologize for being late. I thought absurdly, my parents aren't here yet. And then the roaring sound swallowed everything. The floor didn't just rush up to meet me. It felt like the stage swung upward on a hinge and slammed into my body. There was no pain, just a sudden, violent shift in gravity. I heard a collective gasp from the crowd, a sound like all the air being sucked out of the room at once. And then I heard the dull thud of my own shoulder hitting the wood. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me completely was the blurry, empty space in Section G where my parents were supposed to be. Waking up was not like in the movies. There was no gentle fluttering of eyelids, no soft focus. It was a gasping, terrifying lurch back into existence. My body felt like it had been run over by a truck. My chest ached with a deep, bruising soreness, and there was something plastic taped to my arm. I tried to sit up, but a firm hand pushed me back down. Easy, Claire, stay down. I turned my head. The lights were fluorescent and harsh. I was in a hospital room, not an emergency bay, which meant time had passed. A man in a white coat was standing over me, looking at a monitor that was beeping in a chaotic, jagged rhythm. Where am I asked. My voice was a croak. You are at Cedar Mercy Hospital, the doctor said. He looked tired, with deep lines around his eyes. I am Dr. Aris. You collapsed at your graduation. Do you remember that I closed my eyes? The memory humiliated me instantly. The stage, the fall, the silence. Yes, I whispered. Claire, I need you to be honest with me. Doctor, Aris said, his tone shifting from professional to urgent. Have you been experiencing chest pain, shortness of breath, dizziness? I hesitated. I wanted to lie. I wanted to say no. I was healthy. I was young. This was a fluke. But the beeping of the monitor was too loud to ignore. Yes, I said. For a while, I thought it was stress. The doctor exchanged a look with the nurse standing on the other side of the bed. It isn't stress. You have a significant arrhythmia. Your heart is beating out of sync, and your blood pressure bottomed out. We have you stabilized. But we need to understand your family history. This looks like a conduction disorder, possibly genetic. Family history. The words hung in the air. We have been trying to reach your emergency contacts, the nurse said gently. She had kind eyes and a name tag that read, Sarah, David and Linda Coleman. My stomach dropped. Those were my parents. They aren't here, I asked, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. We have called the number on file 4 times. Sarah said, we left messages. We haven't heard back. Is there another number? I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 3 in the afternoon. The graduation had been at 9:30. They knew. They had to know. If they had shown up late to the graduation, they would have heard that a student collapsed. They would have called my phone. Maybe they are driving. I said, it sounded pathetic even to my own ears. They might have bad reception. Doctor, Aris looked at the chart. We need to make some decisions about your care. Claire, if you need a procedure, we need someone here who can help with your history. Do you have siblings? A spouse, no. I said, just them. I felt tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. Hot and angry. I hated this. I hated being the woman alone in a hospital bed. I hated that I had spent my entire adult life trying to be the person who didn't need anything from anyone. Only to end up here, helpless, waiting for two people who couldn't be bothered to answer a phone. Try them again, I said, my voice trembling. Please. Sarah picked up the receiver on the wall phone and dialed. She put it on speaker so I could hear. The line rang. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings, then the click. You have reached the voicemail of David and Linda. We are currently unavailable. Please leave a message. It was their breezy, casual greeting. They weren't out of range. The phone was on. They just weren't answering. Doctor, Eris sighed. A short, frustrated sound through his nose. He looked at me, and his expression softened into something that looked dangerously like pity. Claire, is there anyone else? Anyone at all, I tried to think. My friends were all at the graduation, probably celebrating at brunch by now, assuming I was being taken care of by my loving family. My colleagues were at work. My grandfather? I said, Elliot Coleman, but he lives an hour away. He's 82. I don't want to worry him. Doctor, Eris didn't ask for permission. He just looked at Sarah. Get the number. I recited the number from memory. It was a landline. Elliot didn't believe in smartphones. He said they made people rude. Sarah dialed. It rang twice. Coleman Residence. Elliot's voice crackled over the line. It sounded strong, sharp. Grandpa? I choked out. Claire. His voice changed instantly. It went from a casual greeting to high alert in a split second. Where are you? Why do you sound like that? I am at the hospital. I said, I fell. I am coming, he said. He didn't ask which hospital. He didn't ask how bad it was. He didn't ask if I had insurance. He just said he was coming. The next hour was a blur of tests, blood draws, cold ultrasound jelly on my chest, the endless, rhythmic beeping of the monitor. I lay there and stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the little dots in the pattern. I tried to construct a narrative that made sense. Maybe my parents had been in a car accident. Maybe they had lost their phones. But I knew the truth. I had known it for a long time. Really. I was an accessory to their lives, a prop they used when it suited them and discarded when it was inconvenient. My graduation wasn't about me. It was about them having a successful daughter to brag about at the country club. If the daughter collapsed and ruined the moment, the daughter became a problem. The door to my room flew open with a bang that made me jump. Elliot Coleman stood in the doorway. He looked like he had run a marathon. His white hair was windblown, standing up in tufts. He was wearing a suit jacket, a charcoal gray wool that I knew he saved for weddings and funerals. But it was buttoned wrong. He had missed a buttonhole, so the fabric bunched awkwardly at his waist. Underneath, he was wearing a t-shirt that said Lake Briar Fishing Club. He was wearing slippers on his feet. He scanned the room, his eyes wild, until they landed on me, Claire. He breathed. He crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed the railing of my bed. His hands were shaking. I had never seen my grandfather shake. He was the steadiest man I knew, a retired structural engineer who looked at the world as a series of load-bearing problems to be solved. I am okay. Grandpa, I said, reaching for his hand. His skin was paper-thin and cold. You are not okay, he snapped, though his voice cracked. You are in a cardiac unit. I saw the sign. Doctor. Aris stepped forward. Mr. Coleman, I am Doctor. Aris. Elliot turned on him, his posture straightening. Talk to me. What is happening to her? She has a condition called sick sinus syndrome, exacerbated by stress and likely a genetic predisposition. Doctor, Aris said, essentially, the electrical system of her heart is misfiring. We are monitoring her for now, but she will likely need a pacemaker. A pacemaker, Elliot repeated. She is 33. Age isn't the only factor. Doctor, Aris said, we needed family history. We tried to reach her parents. Elliot froze. He looked around the room, really seeing it for the first time. He looked at the empty chairs. He looked at the silent phone. "Where are they?" Elliot asked. His voice was very quiet. "I don't know," I whispered. "They didn't come." Elliot's face went through a terrifying transformation. The worry vanished, replaced by a cold, hard rage that made him look 20 years younger. He gripped the bed rail so hard his knuckles turned white. "They didn't come," he repeated. "I tried to defend them. It was a reflex. A habit I had honed over decades. Maybe they got stuck. Maybe they didn't know they knew." Elliot cut me off. He looked at me, his blue eyes piercing. "Who told you to list them as emergency contacts?" The question startled me. It was so specific. I don't know," I stammered. "They are my parents. It is just what you do." "No," Elliot said firmly. "It is what you do when you have people you can rely on. You do not list ghosts as emergency contacts. Claire," he turned back to the doctor, "I am here now. I am her grandfather. I have durable power of attorney for her medical decisions. I made her sign it 5 years ago when she had her wisdom teeth out. Remember, I blinked. I had forgotten that. He had insisted on it, saying that parents could be emotional. But grandparents were practical. At the time, I thought he was just being fussy. Now, it felt like a prophecy. "It is still valid," Elliot said. "I will sign whatever needs to be signed. Tell me everything." For the next 20 minutes, Elliot Coleman became the project manager of my heart. He asked about ejection fractions. He asked about recovery times. He asked about the specific model of the device they were considering. He wrote everything down in a small spiraled notebook he pulled from his jacket pocket. I watched him, feeling a strange sensation in my chest that had nothing to do with the arrhythmia. It was the feeling of being protected. I realized, with a jolt of shame, that I had spent so much energy trying to win the approval of the 2 people who weren't here that I had completely overlooked the person who was standing right in front of me wearing slippers in a hospital. When the doctor finally left to order more tests, the room fell quiet. The afternoon light was fading outside the window, turning the sky a bruised purple. Elliot sat down in the visitor's chair. He looked exhausted now that the adrenaline was fading. He rubbed his face with his hands. "I am sorry." "Grandpa," I said softly, "I didn't mean to scare you." He looked up at me. "You didn't scare me. Claire, you collapsed. That is a biological event. What scares me is that you were alone." "I wasn't alone," I said. "I had the doctors. You know what I mean." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. There was a hesitancy in his manner that wasn't like him. He looked like he was weighing how much truth I could handle while hooked up to a heart monitor. "Claire," he said, "I need to tell you something. What I haven't been able to reach your parents either." He said. My heart skipped a beat. A literal thud on the monitor. "What do you mean?" "For about 3 weeks," Elliot said. "Not since the argument." "Argument?" I asked. "I didn't know you were fighting." "We weren't fighting," Elliot said. "They were demanding. I was refusing." He paused, picking at a loose thread on his trousers. "They came to my house," he said. "Your father brought a stack of papers. He said they were just standard updates for the family trust. Simple housekeeping. He wanted me to sign them right there at the kitchen table. He was in a rush. He said he had a notary waiting in the car." I frowned. That sounded like Dad. Always rushing. Always making things sound urgent so you didn't have time to think. "What did you do?" I asked. "I told him I don't sign anything without reading it," Elliot said. "I told him to leave the papers and I would look them over with my lawyer. And he got angry," Elliot said. "Not just annoyed. Angry. He started shouting about how I didn't trust him, about how I was getting old and confused. He said if I didn't sign them, I was putting the whole family at risk of what I asked. He wouldn't say." Elliot said, "He just grabbed the papers and left. He slammed the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. I haven't heard from them since. I have called. I have stopped by their house. The curtains are drawn." I stared at my grandfather. A cold chill that had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning settled over me. My parents lived in a large house in the best neighborhood in Ridgeway. They drove luxury cars. They went to Europe every summer. What kind of risk could they be in? "Maybe they are just embarrassed," I said weakly. "You know how Dad gets when he doesn't get his way." Elliot looked at me, and his expression was full of a terrible, heavy sorrow. "Claire," he said, "people who are just embarrassed do not disappear when their daughter is in the hospital. People who are embarrassed do not bring a notary to their father's house on a Sunday night." He reached out and covered my hand with his. "I think they are in trouble," he said, "and I think they were trying to make me pay for it." I looked at the empty chairs again. The silence from my phone felt different now. It didn't feel like negligence anymore. It felt like hiding. The nurse walked in with a tray of food. "Dinner," she announced cheerfully. Elliot sat back, composing his face into a mask of calm. "Eat," he commanded me. "We will figure the rest out later. First, we fix your heart." I picked up the plastic spoon, but my hand was shaking. I looked at the gray hospital turkey and the scoop of mashed potatoes. I wasn't just sick. I realized I was in the middle of something I didn't understand. Something that had been happening quietly, in the background, while I was busy studying and working and pretending everything was fine. My body had collapsed, but looking at my grandfather's grim face, I had the sinking feeling that my family was about to follow. The transition from the emergency bay to the cardiac care unit was a study in changing acoustics. We left behind the sharp, rhythmic chaos of the intake floor, the shouting EMTs, the tearing of Velcro blood pressure cuffs, the squeak of rubber soles on tile, and entered a world that felt submerged underwater. The cardiac floor was quiet, insulated, and terrifyingly serious. The air here didn't smell like adrenaline and panic. It smelled like bleach and long nights. My room was private, a luxury I knew I would be paying for later, assuming my insurance paperwork was actually processed. The window looked out over the sprawling parking lot of Cedar Mercy Hospital, where the streetlights were just starting to flicker on against the twilight. I was hooked up to a telemetry monitor, a small box strapped to my chest that transmitted my heart rhythm to a central station, where a nurse I had never met was watching the electrical evidence of my existence. A nurse named Marcus came in with a clipboard. He was young, efficient, and had the kind of bedside manner that suggested he had seen everything and was surprised by nothing. "I need to update your admission file, Claire," Marcus said. He tapped the pen against the paper. "Specifically, we need to finalize your medical proxy. The emergency contact forms are for notification, but the proxy is for decision-making if you are incapacitated." He held the clipboard out to me. I looked at the blank line. The standard procedure, the biological default, was to write the names of your parents, David and Linda Coleman. It was what I had done on every field trip permission slip, every lease agreement, every job application for 33 years. It was a reflex. But my hand hovered over the paper. The ink in the pen felt heavy. They hadn't answered the phone. 4 hours had passed since I hit the floor of the auditorium, and my phone sat on the bedside table, a black, silent rectangle. "I can't reach them," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Marcus didn't blink. He didn't look pitying, which I appreciated, but the pause was loud. "We need a name, Claire," he said gently. "Someone who is here, someone who answers." I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck. It was a specific kind of humiliation, deep and childish. It was the shame of being the kid waiting on the curb after school when everyone else had been picked up. I was a grown woman with a master's degree and a 401k, yet here I was, paralyzed by the emptiness of a single line on a form. "I will do it," a voice came from the corner. Elliot was sitting in the visitor chair, his fishing t-shirt hidden beneath the wrinkled suit jacket he still hadn't taken off. He stood up, his joints popping audibly, and walked over to the bed. "I am her grandfather," Elliot said to Marcus. "I am present, I am sound of mind, and I am not going anywhere." Marcus looked at me for confirmation. "Claire." I looked at Elliot. He looked tired. The skin under his eyes was papery and purple, and his hands, usually so steady, had a faint tremor, but his jaw was set in a line of granite. He wasn't asking to help. He was stating that he would. "Yes," I said, "Elliot Coleman." Elliot took the clipboard. He wrote his name in block letters, pressing down hard enough to indent the paper. He filled out his address, his landline number, and signed the bottom with a flourish that looked like barbed wire. "There," Elliot said, handing the clipboard back. "Now, what is the next step?" The next step was history. 20 minutes later, Dr. Aris returned, accompanied by a younger resident who was typing furiously on a tablet. "We are looking at the telemetry." "Doctor," Aris said, "the arrhythmia is consistent. It is a sick sinus syndrome. Likely tachycardia bradycardia syndrome. Your heart beats too fast, then too slow. It pauses. That is why you fainted. Your brain wasn't getting blood." I nodded. Absorbing the mechanical reality of it, it felt abstract, like he was talking about a car engine and not the organ inside my ribcage. The resident looked up. "We are trying to build a risk profile. Your parents when we spoke to your primary care physician on file. The notes say your family history is clean. No cardiac events, no sudden deaths." I opened my mouth to confirm, but Elliot interrupted. "That is incorrect," he said. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a small, worn spiral notebook. It was the kind you could buy at a drugstore for $1, with a red cover and college-ruled lines. Elliot put on his reading glasses, which were hanging around his neck on a crooked cord. He licked his thumb and flipped through the pages. "My wife, Claire's grandmother, died of a stroke at 62, but she had atrial fibrillation for a decade before that." Elliot read, "My brother, Arthur, had a pacemaker implanted at 45. My father, Claire's great-grandfather, dropped dead in a cornfield at 50. They called it heat stroke back then, but he had been complaining of flutterings for years." The doctor stared at the notebook, then he looked at me. "Claire, did you know any of this?" I shook my head. "No. My parents always said everyone died of old age or accidents. They said we had good peasant stock." Elliot snorted, a sound of pure derision. "Your parents," he said, "think that ignoring a crack in the foundation makes the house stronger. They think medical history is a weakness." "Doctor." Aris took the notebook from Elliot. "This changes the differential diagnosis significantly. If this is familial, we are not looking at an anomaly. We are looking at a genetic expression. It explains why a healthy 33-year-old would drop on a stage." I felt a flash of anger. Why would they lie about that? Why would my parents hide a history of heart disease because it didn't fit the brand? A nasty little voice in my head whispered, "The Colemans were successful. The Colemans were perfect. The Colemans didn't have defective hearts." "We are going to run a genetic panel." "Doctor," Aris said, "but for now, we treat the symptoms. We are scheduling you for a pacemaker implantation, likely the day after tomorrow. We need to let the blood work clear first. A pacemaker," the word felt heavy and metallic. Elliot reached out and squeezed my foot through the blanket. "We will handle it," he said. "Doctor." Aris and the resident left, taking the precious notebook with them to photocopy. The room settled back into silence, but the air felt charged now. The disconnect between my reality and the story my parents had told me was growing wider. A woman in a navy blue blazer knocked on the open door. She held a different kind of clipboard, the administrative kind. "Ms. Coleman, I am from Patient Access. I just need to verify your insurance authorization." "Sure," I said. "It is through my employer. Supply Chain Logistics. It is a good plan. I am sure it is," she said, frowning at her paperwork. "But we are getting a flag on the address verification. The insurance company says the authorization is pending because the address on the claim doesn't match the address on your file." I frowned. "That is impossible. I have lived in the same apartment on 4th Street for 3 years. The woman turned the clipboard around so I could see. "Is this your current mailing address?" she asked. I squinted at the paper. "P.O. Box, 449 North Ridgeway Distribution Center." "No," I said. "I don't have a P.O. Box." The woman sighed. "Well, according to the system, your address was updated 9 days ago. If we don't get this matched, the claim will be denied, and you will be liable for the out-of-pocket rate." I felt a cold prickle of sweat on my hairline. I didn't change it. I said, my voice rising in pitch, "Why would I change my address to a P.O. box I don't own?" Maybe it is a clerical error, Elliot said calmly. He was watching me closely. Don't get agitated. Claire, watch the monitor. I looked at the screen. My heart rate was climbing. 80, 90. It must be an error, the woman said soothingly. I will flag it for manual review. Just check with your HR department when you can. She left, but the anxiety didn't go with her. Give me my phone. I said to Elliot, Claire, you are supposed to be resting. Give me the phone. Grandpa, please. He handed it to me. I unlocked it. My fingers clumsy. I ignored the unanswered texts from friends asking if I was okay. I went straight to my banking app. I logged in. The Face ID took a second to recognize me because of the angle of the pillow. The balance looked normal. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Check the transaction history, Elliot said softly. He wasn't telling me to stop. He was telling me to look. I scrolled down. Coffee, gas, grocery store, tuition payment. Then I saw it. 2 days ago, 2 deposits. Acme verification $0.12. Acme verification $0.18. I stared at them. I knew what these were. In my job. I dealt with vendor setups all the time. These were micro deposits. They were used to link a bank account to a third-party payment system or a lender. I scrolled up. There was a notification bell in the corner of the app I usually ignored. I tapped it. New credit alert. Hard inquiry. Pine Ledger, auto finance. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like it hit the mattress. What is it? Elliot asked. I turned the screen toward him. Someone is linking my checking account to an outside system. And someone ran a credit check for a car loan yesterday. I was at the rehearsal dinner. I wasn't buying a car. Elliot put his glasses back on and peered at the screen. Pine Ledger. He read, never heard of them. It is a subprime lender. I said, the knowledge surfacing from the supply chain finance seminars I had taken. They do high-interest auto loans for people with bad credit. Grandpa, my credit score is 780. Not for long, Elliot said grimly. He sat back, folding his hands over his stomach. Don't panic, he said. Don't panic. I felt the hysteria bubbling up in my throat. Someone is stealing my identity while I'm lying in a hospital bed. Number Elliot said. Someone stole it weeks ago. You are just finding out now. He pointed a finger at me. Panic is useless. Panic is what they want. Panic makes you sloppy. You need to document. Take a screenshot. Write down the dates. We build a file. His steadiness was a splash of cold water. I looked at him. This wasn't the fishing grandpa who told bad jokes. This was the structural engineer who knew that when a beam cracked. You didn't scream at it. You shored it up. I realized then that I had been trained by my parents to smooth things over, to smile, to apologize, to make the problem go away so we could all go back to pretending. Elliot was teaching me something different. He was teaching me to look at the wreckage and take notes. I took the screenshots. I saved them to a hidden folder. The phone buzzed in my hand. A text message. My heart hammered against my ribs. Mom. I stared at the name. For a second, I felt a surge of pathetic hope. Maybe they were in the lobby. Maybe they were rushing up the stairs. I opened the message. We heard, keep us posted. That was it. 5 words. I read it again. We heard, keep us posted. No. Are you okay? No. We are coming. No. I love you. Just an acknowledgement of receipt. Like I was a package that had been delivered to the wrong neighbor. I felt something break inside me. It wasn't my heart this time. It was the thin, brittle tether of hope I had been holding on to for 3 decades. The hope that if I was just good enough, smart enough, successful enough, they would finally look at me and see a person, not an asset. I showed the phone to Elliot. He read it. He didn't say anything. He just closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, they were very cold. They aren't coming. Claire, he said. No, I said, they aren't. Elliot took the phone from my hand and set it on the table. Face down. I need to tell you the rest, he said. The rest about the papers. He said, I told you they wanted me to sign something. I didn't tell you what it was. I waited. They wanted me to co-sign a refinance on their house. Elliot said, They are underwater. Claire. They took out a second mortgage 5 years ago to pay for that trip to Italy and the new landscaping. They haven't been paying the principal. Now the rate is adjusting, and they can't make the payments. I stared at him. My parents lived like royalty. They bought wine by the case. They drove cars that cost more than my tuition. But that wasn't all. Elliot continued. The other document. It was a durable power of attorney. For me, they wanted temporary management of my brokerage account. They said I was getting too old to manage the volatility of the market. They said they wanted to protect my assets. He let out a short, dry laugh. Protect them right into their own pockets. I felt sick. Physically sick. You refused, I asked. I refused. I told them my assets were managed just fine. I told them if they needed money, they could ask for a loan, and we would draw up terms. And your father told me that I was a selfish old man who was going to let the family legacy rot. He said the money was going to be theirs eventually anyway. So why was I making it so hard? He looked at me, his eyes full of shame. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to be in the middle. Elliot said, I thought I could hold the line. I thought if I said no enough times, they would figure it out. I didn't think they would turn on you. I looked at the ceiling tiles. I tried to defend them. It was a reflex, as automatic as breathing. They are just stressed. I said, you know how Dad gets when he feels cornered? He doesn't mean it. He just panics. I stopped. The words hung in the air, stale and recycled. I had said them 1,000 times. He didn't mean to miss my play. He didn't mean to forget my birthday. He didn't mean to spend my college fund on a boat. I looked at Elliot. He wasn't buying it, and for the first time, neither was I. It isn't stress, I whispered. It is predation. Elliot nodded slowly. There was a knock at the door. Not the brisk knock of a nurse, but a soft, hesitant rap. A woman with a kind face and a cardigan stepped in. She had a badge that said social work. Ms. Coleman. I am Sarah, the floor social worker. Do you have a moment? I nodded. I wanted to touch base regarding your discharge planning. Sarah said, I know it is a few days away, but we like to be ahead of things. Okay, I said. We had a call earlier. Sarah said. She glanced at Elliot. Then back to me. From a gentleman. He didn't give his name. He said he was handling the family situation. My stomach tightened. What did he want? Elliot asked. His voice sharp. He wanted to know the exact date and time of discharge. Sarah said, and he asked if Ms. Coleman would be releasing to a private residence or a facility. Did you tell him? I asked. No, of course not. Sarah said, we have strict privacy laws. I asked him to verify his identity and his relationship to the patient, and he hung up. Sarah said, she looked concerned. It was probably just a confused relative. Sarah said, trying to be reassuring, but because he wouldn't identify himself. I made a note in your file. We will require photo ID from anyone picking you up. Thank you. I said. She left. Elliot and I looked at each other, handling the family situation. Elliot repeated, that is a very specific phrase. It sounds like a fixer. I said, or a debt collector, or your father pretending to be someone else. Elliot said, the room felt very small suddenly. I felt exposed. My parents weren't just absent. They were active. They were moving pieces around on a board I hadn't even known I was playing on. I need to check my email. I said, Claire Grandpa, if they are applying for loans, they need verification. They need pay stubs. They need tax returns. Where would they get them? Elliot paused. Your old laptop? No. I wiped it before I gave it to Mom to use for her recipes. My cloud storage, I asked myself. I grabbed my phone again. I opened my email app. My inbox was full of work emails. Graduation congratulations, newsletters, nothing suspicious. I checked the sent folder. Nothing. I checked the trash. My thumb hovered over the screen. The trash folder was usually full of spam and old receipts. I refreshed it. At the very top, time-stamped 6 hours ago while I was unconscious in the ER was a deleted email. Subject application _complete. PDF. From me to Loan's spine ledger. Com. I felt the blood drain from my face. I opened the email. There was an attachment. I clicked it. It was a PDF, a loan application for a $25,000 auto loan. Applicant Claire L. Coleman, employer Ridgeway Supply Logistics, income verified. I scrolled to the bottom. There, on the signature line, was my name. It wasn't a digital font. It was a signature. It looped the C and crossed the L just like I did. It looked exactly like my signature, but I hadn't signed it. I was in a hospital bed with electrodes on my chest when this was sent. I zoomed in. The pixels around the signature were slightly different, a little grainier than the rest of the document. It was a copy-paste. They had lifted my signature from somewhere else, maybe an old birthday card, maybe a lease I had left at their house, and pasted it onto a loan application. They hadn't just used my data. They had impersonated me. They had committed a felony while I was fighting for my life. I held the phone out to Elliot. I couldn't speak. I just pointed at the screen. Elliot looked. He saw the signature. He saw the timestamp. He looked up at me, and the last traces of the kindly grandfather vanished. His face hardened into something unrecognizable. They aren't just in trouble. Claire, he said softly. They are dangerous. I stared at the signature that wasn't mine. I realized then that the collapse on stage hadn't been the end of my life. It was the beginning of a war. And the enemy wasn't my heart condition. It was the people who had given me the heart in the first place. The discharge process was less of a liberation and more of a bureaucratic handover. I was wheeled out of Cedar Mercy Hospital in a standard-issue wheelchair, holding a thick plastic bag containing my patient instructions and a box of heart-rate-friendly crackers. The automatic doors slid open, and the humid North Carolina air hit me like a physical weight, thick with pollen and exhaust. Elliot's car was waiting at the curb. It was a 10-year-old Buick, a vehicle that was resolutely uncool but immaculately maintained. The leather seats were conditioned, the floor mats were vacuumed, and the engine idled with a barely audible hum. It was the car of a man who took care of things. I eased myself into the passenger seat, wincing as the movement pulled at the fresh incision site near my collarbone, where they had implanted the loop recorder, a temporary measure before the pacemaker surgery scheduled for later in the week. We are going to Lake Briar, Elliot stated, putting the car into gear. I know, I said, leaning my head back against the headrest. I have to go back to my apartment eventually. Grandpa, I have plants. I have mail. Your plants are dead, Elliot said matter-of-factly. And I had your mail forwarded to my house this morning. I looked at him. You did what I went to the post office with my power of attorney, he said, eyes fixed on the road. You are not going back to that apartment. Claire, it is a third-floor walk-up. You are not climbing stairs. You are coming to the lake. It is flat. It is quiet. And I have a generator if the power goes out. I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy. And honestly, the thought of my empty apartment, with its silence and its shadows, terrified me. The drive took 40 minutes, winding away from the suburban sprawl of Ridgeway into the denser, greener tree line of the county. Lake Briar was a community of small, older homes tucked into the woods, the kind of place where people lived year-round and knew each other's trucks. Elliot's house was a white bungalow with a wraparound porch and a lawn that looked like it had been trimmed with manicure scissors inside. The house smelled of cedar wood and lemon polish. It was tidy in a way that felt restful, not sterile. There were no piles of unread magazines, no clutter. Everything had a place. Elliot set me up in the guest room, which had a view of the water through the trees. Rest, he commanded. I am making soup. I lay on the bed, listening to the sounds of him moving in the kitchen, the clink of a pot, the running water. It was domestic and safe, but my mind was still racing at 80 miles an hour. I waited until I heard the distinct whistle of a tea kettle before I reached into my bag and pulled out my work laptop. I hadn't wiped this one. I opened it, the screen glowing blue in the dim room. Elliot had told me to document, so I was going to document. I navigated to the credit reporting agency's website. My fingers felt cold on the trackpad. I requested my full report, answering the security questions about my first car and my previous addresses. The wheel spun. The report loaded. I scrolled past the summary and went straight to the inquiries section. My eyes scanned the list. Soft inquiry. Ridgeway Property Management, 3 weeks ago. Soft inquiry. Apex Lending Solutions, 2 weeks ago. Soft inquiry. Vericheck Identity Services. 10 days ago. Soft inquiries didn't hurt your score, but they told a story. Someone was shopping. Someone was testing the waters, seeing what kind of fish they could catch with my social security number. Then I saw it. The hard inquiry. Hard inquiry. Pine Ledger, Auto Finance. Date May 20th. May 20th. That was 3 days before graduation. Pine Ledger. I opened a new tab and searched the name. The website was flashy, full of stock photos of happy people holding car keys. The fine print at the bottom was terrifying. Interest rates starting at 18%. High-risk approval guaranteed. They weren't just buying a car. They were buying a car using a predatory lender because they knew a traditional bank might ask too many questions or require a face-to-face signing. Pine Ledger was digital first. Quick approval. Minimal vetting. I felt a wave of nausea. I clicked over to my bank account. The 2 small deposits I had seen in the hospital were still there. I looked at the transaction details. They originated from an external account transfer setup. I needed to see who initiated it. I called the bank's customer service line, putting the phone on speaker while I navigated the automated hell of the menu system. Finally, I got a human. I see a pending link to an external account. I told the representative, trying to keep my voice steady, "Can you tell me the name on the other account? I can't give you the full details for privacy reasons." The rep said, "Orud, but it looks like a joint account at First National." "A joint account. Does it list the account holders?" I pressed. "It lists David and Linda C." The rep said. I hung up. David and Linda. My parents. They weren't just stealing my identity to buy things. They were linking my financial bloodstream to theirs. They were setting up a siphon. Elliot appeared in the doorway, holding a tray with a bowl of vegetable soup and a sleeve of saltines. He looked at the laptop, then at my face. "You found something," he said. It wasn't a question. "They linked my checking account to theirs," I said, my voice sounding hollow. "And the car loan inquiry. It was them. It is all them." Elliot set the tray down on the nightstand. He sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. I suspected as much. He said quietly, "How?" I asked. "How did you know they were this desperate?" "They just bought a new boat last summer. They didn't buy it." Elliot said, "They leased it, and they stopped making payments in January." He sighed, rubbing his knees. "Claire, your parents have been living a lie for a decade. Your father lost his position at the firm 4 years ago. He has been consulting ever since, which implies income. But really, he has been burning through equity." I stared at him. Dad lost his job. He told me he went independent because he wanted more freedom. He went independent because he was fired for billing irregularities. Elliot said, "He managed to keep it quiet, avoided charges by paying restitution. But the income stopped. The spending didn't. He looked out the window at the lake. They became obsessed with access." He said, "First, they wanted access to the family trust. Then they wanted access to my deed. When I locked them out, they looked for the next available resource. Me." I whispered. "You have perfect credit." Elliot said, "You have a steady job. You are single. You are the perfect host for a parasite." The word hung in the air. Parasite. It was a biological term. It implied an organism that feeds on another to survive, often killing the host in the process. I picked up my phone. "Don't," Elliot warned. "I have to." I said, "I have to hear them say it." I dialed my mother's number. It rang 4 times. I was about to hang up when she answered. "Claire." Her voice was breathless, high-pitched. "Oh my God. Honey, we have been so worried. We were just about to call the hospital again. The lie was so smooth, so practiced." "Mom," I said, "I am out of the hospital." "Oh, thank God." "Where are you?" "Are you at the apartment?" "We can come over. We can bring dinner." I need you to listen to me, I said, cutting through her performance. I am looking at my credit report. Why is there a hard inquiry from Pine Ledger Auto Finance? There was a silence, a pause that lasted 2 seconds too long. Pine, who, she asked? I have never heard of that. Don't lie to me. Mom, it is dated 3 days ago, and there are deposits in my bank account linking it to yours. Claire, you are sounding very agitated, she said, her voice shifting into a soothing, patronizing register. You just had a medical episode. The doctor said you might be confused. I am not confused, I snapped. I am looking at the PDF. Did you try to buy a car in my name? I heard a muffling sound, like a hand over the receiver, and then my father's voice came on the line. Deeper, authoritative, impatient. Claire, stop this. Did you do it? I asked. We are handling some family logistics, he said. We needed a temporary bridge for a vehicle swap. It is merely a credit leverage. We were going to pay it off before the first cycle. You wouldn't have even noticed. You forged my signature. I said, that is fraud. You are overreacting. He said, the phrase hit me like a slap. You are overreacting. He had said it when I found out they spent my college fund on a timeshare. You are overreacting. We will make it back. He had said it when I cried because they forgot to pick me up from the airport. You are overreacting. Take a cab. It was his magic spell. The words he used to turn my legitimate anger into hysteria. I am not overreacting, I said, my voice shaking. I am the victim of a crime. Oh, stop being dramatic, he scoffed. We are your parents. We paid for your braces. We put a roof over your head. We are borrowing a little credibility to get through a rough patch. If you were a supportive daughter, you would have offered. You didn't ask, I yelled. You stole? We didn't steal anything. We are managing assets. And frankly, considering you are currently incapacitating yourself with this heart nonsense, maybe you need someone to manage your assets. I froze. What did you say? You heard me? He said coolly. You collapsed. Claire, you are obviously unwell. Maybe you aren't in a position to be making financial decisions. I hung up. I sat there, the phone slippery in my sweaty palm. I felt like I couldn't breathe. He had flipped it. In 30 seconds. He had turned his theft into my incompetence. Elliot took the phone from my hand. Eat your soup, he said. His voice was like iron. I can't. I whispered. Eat. We need your strength. You are going to need it for the lawyers. I looked at him. Lawyers. Elliot reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This came in the mail today, too, he said. It was forwarded from your apartment. I unfolded it. It was a collection notice. Final notice. Amount due $450. Service date, April 12th. Provider Holloway, urgent care. I have never been to Holloway Urgent Care. I said, look at the address. Elliot said. I looked. It was a clinic in a strip mall on the south side of Ridgeway. Now look at this. Elliot opened his notebook and pulled out a folded photocopy of the management agreement my parents had tried to force him to sign weeks ago. He pointed to the witness signature line at the bottom. Witness J. Smith, address 1402 Oak Street, Suite B. I looked back at the medical bill. Holloway Urgent Care, 1402 Oak Street, Suite B. They didn't just go to a clinic, Elliot said. They used the clinic's address as a fake witness address for their legal documents. They probably grabbed a stranger in the waiting room to sign it. Or they forged that too. It was sloppy. It was desperate. And it connected their financial fraud against me to their legal fraud against him. You need to call a specialist, Elliot said. I have the name of a man in town. Robert Vance. He deals with elder fraud and identity theft. I hesitated. Grandpa, if I call a lawyer, that's it. There is no going back. They could go to jail. Elliot looked at me, his blue eyes filled with a terrible pragmatism. Claire, they are already building a cage for you. They just told you on the phone they think you are incapacitated. They are going to use your collapse to take control of everything you have. You can either be their daughter and their victim, or you can be a stranger and their plaintiff. You cannot be both. I looked at the soup. I looked at the lake. I thought about the empty seat at graduation. Call him. I said. The next morning, the reality of my condition set in. I woke up dizzy. My chest felt heavy. A reminder that the electrical impulses keeping me alive were misfiring. We had a pre-operative call scheduled with the anesthesiologist and doctor, Eris, to discuss the pacemaker implantation. Elliot set it up on the speakerphone in the kitchen. We need to review the family history again. Doctor, Eris said, his voice tinny through the speaker. We are looking at the genetic markers. Claire, we are operating under the assumption that this is the Coleman conduction defect, inherited from your father's line. I nodded at the phone. Yes. Elliot cleared his throat. Doctor, Eris, Elliot said, we need to correct the record on that. There was a pause. Correct it how? The assumption that Claire inherited this from her father is medically impossible, Elliot said. Why, doctor? Eris asked. Because my son David Coleman is not my biological son, Elliot said. The room went dead silent. I turned to look at my grandfather. He was standing by the window, his back very straight, staring out at the bird feeder. What I whispered. He was adopted, Elliot said to the phone, his voice steady but strained. My wife and I adopted David when he was 3 months old. It was a closed adoption. We never spoke of it. We wanted him to feel completely ours. I felt the floor tilt. My father wasn't a Coleman by blood. I stammered. But Mom always said I had your eyes. She said I had the Coleman chin. People see what they want to see, Elliot said gently. Doctor, Eris broke the silence. Mr. Coleman, this is critical information. If your son is not the biological link, then Claire's condition did not come from him, unless it came from her mother, Elliot said, or unless it is a de novo mutation, or unless... He trailed off. Doctor, Eris's voice became very serious. Claire, this changes the risk profile. If you have the Coleman-specific defect which you appear to have, and your father is not a Coleman by blood, then we are missing a massive piece of the puzzle. Is there any possibility that... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The implication was that my father wasn't my father. No, Elliot said firmly. I have seen the birth certificates. I was there when Claire was born. David is her father. Then we have a medical mystery. Doctor, Eris said, we are treating a phenotype that matches your family, in a patient who shouldn't have your genes. We need to proceed with the pacemaker regardless. But Claire, you need to know that your parents withheld this. By letting us think David was the biological link, they allowed us to make assumptions that could have delayed proper testing. They didn't tell you, I asked Elliot after we hung up. They didn't tell the doctors about the adoption, Numbra, Elliot said. He sat down heavily at the table. Your father has always been ashamed of it. He considers it a defect. He forbade your mother from speaking of it. He wanted the pedigree. He wanted the Coleman name to be pure. He looked at me with infinite sadness. They would rather risk your life than admit a truth that made them feel insecure. I felt a cold rage settling in my stomach, heavier than the soup. It wasn't just about money, it was about narrative. They had edited reality to suit their ego, and I was just a character in their fiction. If I died of a heart defect, they refused to explain. That was just a plot twist they would have to manage. My phone buzzed on the table. It was an unknown number, local area code. I picked it up. Hello, Ms. Coleman, a voice asked. It was a male voice, smooth, professional, not a robot. Who is this? My name is Arthur Penn. I am calling on behalf of a family matter. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. I don't know an Arthur Penn. I am working with your parents, David and Linda, regarding the restructuring of the family estate. He said. His tone was polite, almost solicitous. I understand you are recovering at your grandfather's home. I hope you are resting well. What do you want? I asked. We are just trying to ease the burden on Elliot. Mr. Penn said, we know he is getting up in years, and with your medical situation, it is a lot for one household to manage. We have prepared some routine documents, just temporary guardianship papers that would allow your parents to assist with your medical and financial decisions while you recover. Guardianship, I repeated. It is just a formality, he purred. To ensure your bills are paid and your treatment is authorized. We can have a courier bring them to Lake Briar this afternoon. It would really help everyone if you could just sign them. It would de-escalate everything. De-escalate. You want me to sign over control of my life to the people who just forged my signature on a loan application, I asked. Mr. Penn's voice didn't waver. Miss Coleman, accusations like that are unhelpful. We are trying to protect you. If you don't sign voluntarily, the family may be forced to pursue other avenues to ensure your safety. Are you threatening me? I am advising you. Your parents love you. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. Who was that? Elliot asked. A man named Arthur Penn. I said, he wants me to sign guardianship papers. He said if I don't, they will pursue other avenues. Elliot's face went dark. Penn, he muttered. That is the shyster your father plays golf with. He isn't a family lawyer. He is a corporate raider. He stood up and walked to the front door. Where are you going to get the mail? He said. I saw the carrier stop while you were on the phone. He went outside. I sat at the table, trying to calm my racing heart. The pacemaker, the adoption, the loans, the guardianship, it was all closing in. Elliot came back in. He was holding a single envelope. It was thick. It had a green certified mail sticker on it. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to him. What is it? I asked. Elliot opened it. He pulled out a stack of legal documents. He read the cover page. He didn't move. He didn't blink. Grandpa? He walked over and placed the papers in front of me. Read it, he said. I looked at the bold text at the top. State of North Carolina, County of Ridgeway. Petition for adjudication of incompetence and appointment of guardian. Respondent Elliot J. Coleman. I scanned down the page. Petitioners. David and Linda Coleman. Allegations. The respondent is suffering from advanced cognitive decline, paranoia, and is vulnerable to undue influence. The respondent recently removed a vulnerable adult family member, Claire Coleman, from hospital care against medical advice. And then, at the bottom, under supporting contacts, the petitioners attach the sworn statement of Claire Coleman pending in support of this petition. I stared at my name. They weren't just coming for me, they were coming for him, and they were using my silence, my pending statement, as the weapon to do it. They were going to declare him incompetent. They were going to take his house, his money, and me. I looked up at Elliot. He looked old. For the first time, he looked truly old. They are going to say I am senile, he whispered, because I took you in. I reached out and put my hand on top of his. My fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. No, I said, they aren't. I picked up the phone again. What are you doing? Elliot asked. I am calling Robert Vance. I said, I am done being their daughter. I looked at the petition again. I am going to be their plaintiff. Robert Vance's office was tucked away on the second floor of a brick building that housed a bakery and a dry cleaner. It smelled of yeast and old paper. The waiting room had 2 chairs upholstered in fading floral fabric, and the receptionist was a woman named Barb, who looked like she could organize a hurricane into alphabetical order. I sat in one of the floral chairs, my left arm carefully guarded against my chest. The incision site from the loop recorder was itching, a sharp, localized reminder that my body was currently a construction zone. Elliot sat next to me, his posture rigid. He was wearing his suit jacket again, though this time he had managed to button it correctly. Mr. Vance will see you now, Barb said, not looking up from her typing. Robert Vance was a small man with sharp eyes and a desk that looked like a fortress of manila folders. He didn't offer platitudes. He shook our hands, gestured for us to sit, and opened the folder Elliot had prepared. I have reviewed the credit reports and the petition. Vance said, his voice was gravelly, the voice of a man who spent his days arguing with insurance companies and stubborn relatives. We have 2 separate fires here. We need to decide which one to put out first. The identity theft. I said immediately, they are ruining my credit. Vance nodded. That is the most urgent financially. But the petition, that is the most dangerous legally. He tapped the copy of the document Elliot had received. Briarstone Family Advocacy. Vance read. It sounds official, doesn't it? It sounds like a nonprofit that helps struggling families. It isn't, I asked. Vance spun his monitor around so we could see. It is a registered LLC, incorporated 3 months ago in Delaware. He said, the registered agent is a corporate service company, but look at the filing address for the petitioner. I leaned in. It was a P.O. box in a strip mall in Ridgeway. It is a shell, Vance said, a common tactic. Children who want to force a competency hearing but don't want to look like the bad guys will sometimes hire a consultancy to file the paperwork. It puts a layer of bureaucratic distance between them and the accusation. They can say, "Oh, we didn't want to do it, but the advocacy group recommended it for Dad's safety." I felt a chill slide down my spine. It was so calculated. It was a strategy. So my parents hired this company to declare Elliot incompetent, I asked. Likely, Vance said, and they are using your medical event as the catalyst. The narrative is simple. The grandfather is erratic. The granddaughter is unstable. The parents are the only responsible parties. If they get guardianship of Elliot, they get control of his assets. If they get power of attorney over you, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. They get everything. I whispered. Vance leaned back. Here is what we are going to do. First, Claire, you are going to freeze everything. The 3 bureaus, check systems, the dragging of the lake, we lock it down. Second, you are going to file a police report for identity theft regarding the Pine Ledger loan. I hesitated. A police report meant criminal charges. It meant handcuffs. I know, Vance said, watching my face. It is heavy, but you cannot dispute the debt without the report. The bank won't believe you unless you are willing to tell the police. If you don't file, you are essentially accepting the debt. I looked at Elliot. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his hands. Do it, Elliot said softly. Third, Vance continued, we file an objection to the petition. We submit affidavits from your doctors stating that you are of sound mind, and affidavits from Elliot's doctors stating the same. We attack the premise. He handed me a pen and a notepad. Document everything. He commanded, every text, every voicemail, every time they sneeze in your direction. I want a timestamp. We are building a wall. Ms. Coleman, and we need bricks. The drive back to the lake was quiet. The trees blurred past in a smear of green. I felt nauseous, not from my heart, but from the realization of what I had to do. I had to declare war on the people who had raised me. When we got back to the house, I went to the guest room and closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed and placed my phone in front of me like it was a bomb I had to defuse. I didn't wait for them to call me. I called them. I dialed my father's cell. He answered on the second ring. Claire, he said. His voice was clipped, businesslike. We were just discussing you. I am sure you were. I said, I have the petition. Dad. There was a silence on the line, a heavy, thick silence. I don't know what you are talking about, he said eventually. The petition for adjudication of incompetence. I said, reading the title off the paper Vance had given me, filed by Briarstone Family Advocacy, listing me as a supporting contact. Oh, that, he said dismissively. That is just administrative. Arthur recommended we get some safeguards in place, given Elliot's behavior at the hospital. Elliot's behavior. I cut in. He was the only one there. He was manic. Claire, my father snapped. He was shouting at doctors. He removed you against medical advice. We are just trying to make sure everyone is safe. I took a deep breath. I saw the loan application. Dad. Pine Ledger. Auto finance. May 20th. $25,000. The silence returned, but this time it felt dangerous. I saw the fake signature. I continued. I saw the deposit verification in my account. I know you forged it. Claire, listen to me. My mother's voice came on the line. She must have been listening on an extension, or he put me on speaker. It isn't what it looks like. Then what is it, I asked. Tell me. Mom, explain to me how stealing my identity isn't what it looks like. We didn't steal it, she pleaded. Her voice was trembling. We were just borrowing the credentials. We have a liquidity issue, a short-term cash flow problem. We were going to pay it off as soon as the house refinance went through. We were doing it for the family. For the family. I repeated. Yes, she said. We are a family. Claire. We help each other. We didn't want to worry you with the details while you were studying. We thought we could handle it. So you committed a felony, I asked. Stop using that word, my father shouted. The anger was back. Hot and defensive. You are ungrateful. You have no idea what it costs to maintain this life. To maintain your life. We sacrificed everything for you. And the minute we need a little flexibility, you side with him, my grandfather. You are choosing Grandpa over us. He spat. The man is senile. Claire, he is hoarding resources that should be used to support the whole family, and you are helping him do it. I felt a sudden, crystal-clear realization. It hit me harder than the floor of the graduation stage. They didn't see me as a person. They didn't see Elliot as a person. They saw us as resources. I was credit. Elliot was capital. We were just accounts to be liquidated. My collapse hadn't been a tragedy to them. It had been an inconvenience because it froze my assets, and an opportunity because it made me vulnerable. Their emotional logic was purely transactional. They showed up when there was leverage. They disappeared when there was work. I am not choosing him over you. I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I am choosing reality over fraud. I am filing a police report. I said, Claire, don't you dare. My father warned. I am filing it today, and I am contesting the petition. Do not contact me again. I hung up. I stared at the wall. I thought I would cry. I thought I would feel guilty. But all I felt was a deep, exhausting emptiness. The bridge was burned. I had lit the match. I walked out to the living room. Elliot was sitting in his armchair, staring at the unlit fireplace. He looked small. I told them. I said. Elliot nodded slowly. He didn't look at me. I need to tell you something. He said. What I knew. He said, you knew about the loan, no, not the loan. I knew they were drowning. I knew they were dangerous. He turned to look at me. His eyes were wet. I suspected that when I cut them off, they would turn to you. He admitted. I lay awake at night thinking about it. I thought about warning you. Why didn't you? I asked. Because I wanted you to have parents, he whispered. I wanted you to keep that illusion for a little longer. I thought, I hoped they would have a line they wouldn't cross. I hoped they loved you more than they loved the money. He wiped his eye with the back of his hand. I am sorry. Claire, I gambled with your safety because I didn't want to break your heart. I walked over and sat on the ottoman in front of him. I took his hands. They were rough, calloused from years of working with wood and stone. Grandpa, I said. He looked at me. I need you to stop hoping. I said. He blinked. They are who they are. I said. Hoping they are different is what got us here. You hoped they would be responsible. I hoped they would show up. We have to stop. We have to look at what is actually there. Elliot took a deep breath. He squeezed my hands. You are right, he said. No more hoping. No more hoping. I agreed. Just doing. The next 2 days were a blur of paperwork and medical prep. I froze my credit files, which required answering endless security questions about mortgages I didn't have and cars I had never bought. I filed the police report online, typing out the narrative of the theft in stark, clinical boxes, on the afternoon before my surgery. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Coleman, a woman's voice asked. This is Sheila from Cedar Mercy Billing and Records. Yes, I felt my stomach tighten. I'm just calling to verify a request we received, she said. We had a caller about 20 minutes ago identifying herself as your mother. She was requesting a copy of your full discharge summary and the operative notes for your upcoming procedure. My mother. Did you give them to her? I asked. No. Sheila said, that is why I'm calling. She provided your name and date of birth correctly. But when we asked for the last 4 digits of your social security number to verify the release, she gave us a number that was off by 2 digits. Off by 2 digits. It was sloppy. It was guessing. She got very agitated when we wouldn't release the records. Sheila continued. She said she needed them for insurance verification. But since the number didn't match, we denied the request. I just wanted to alert you. Thank you. Sheila. I said, please put a password on my account. No information to anyone who doesn't have the password. I will do that right now. I hung up. They were trying to get my medical records. Why to prove I was incompetent? To open a medical credit card? Or just to have more data points for their next application? It felt violating in a way I couldn't explain. My body, my broken heart, was just another document to them. My privacy was treated like community property. The morning of the surgery was gray and rainy. Elliot drove me to the hospital in silence. We listened to the wipers slapping against the windshield. We checked in at the surgical center. I changed into the thin, open-backed gown that always made you feel like a victim before anything even happened to you. I sat on the gurney, shivering. Elliot sat in the plastic chair next to me. He held my glasses. You are going to be fine, he said. Doctor, Aris is the best. He has hands like a concert pianist. I am scared. Grandpa. I admitted. I know. He said, it is okay to be scared. It means you are paying attention. He reached into his bag. I brought you water, he said, holding out a bottle. And I brought the crossword. We are going to do the crossword. He started reading the clues. 4 letters, a flightless bird, kiwi, I said, 5 letters, a celestial body, comet. He didn't talk about the lawsuit. He didn't talk about my parents. He just asked me for words. He anchored me to the present moment, to the simple reality of ink on paper. It was mundane, it was boring, and it was the most loving thing anyone had ever done for me. They came for me an hour later. The anesthesia hit me like a warm wave, and the last thing I saw was Elliot giving me a thumbs up, his face determined and kind. I woke up in the recovery room. My chest felt like it had been kicked by a mule. There was a dull, throbbing ache under my collarbone, and a pressure bandage taped tightly to my skin. I was alive. The machine was in. Elliot was there when I opened my eyes. You did good, kid, he said. I checked my phone. It was a reflex. There was a message. Sender Dad. Time. 1 hour ago. We are in town. We need to talk. Privately. Meet us at the Roasted Bean on 3rd Street at 4 o'clock. Do not bring Elliot. I stared at the screen. In town. They hadn't come to the hospital. They were in a coffee shop, and they wanted to talk privately. Private meant no witnesses. Private meant they could gaslight me without an audience. I showed the message to Elliot. You are not going. He said, you just had heart surgery. I am going. I said. My voice was raspy from the intubation tube. Claire. I have to. Grandpa. If I don't face them, they will keep coming. I need to look them in the eye. I need them to see that I am not the daughter they think they have. Elliot looked at me. He saw something in my face that made him stop arguing. Okay, he said, but I am driving you, and I'm sitting in the car. If you aren't out in 20 minutes, I'm coming in. I agreed. I got dressed slowly, wincing with every movement. I put on a loose button-down shirt that hid the bandage. I didn't put on makeup. I didn't care what I looked like. We drove to the Roasted Bean. It was a trendy cafe near the county courthouse, full of lawyers and paralegals getting their afternoon caffeine. It was public. It was safe. I walked in. My legs felt shaky, but I forced myself to stand tall. I saw them in a booth in the back. My mother looked perfect. Her hair was blown out, her makeup flawless. My father was wearing a polo shirt and a blazer. They looked like a catalog couple. They looked like the American dream. I walked over and slid into the booth opposite them. I placed a manila folder on the table. Inside were the printouts of the loan application, the deposit records, and the police report number. Claire, my mother said. She reached for my hand. You look pale. I pulled my hand away. I just had a pacemaker implanted 3 hours ago. I said. She flinched. Oh, we didn't know it was today. You didn't ask. I said. My father cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting around the cafe to see if anyone was watching. We appreciate you coming, he said. We need to settle this misunderstanding before it gets out of hand. It isn't a misunderstanding. I said, "It is fraud." "Lower your voice," he hissed. "I will not." I said, "You forged my signature. You took out a loan in my name. You tried to declare my grandfather incompetent. Explain it." My father sighed. He picked up his coffee cup and set it down again. "We were cornered." "Claire," he said. His voice dropped, losing its bluster. It sounded tired. "Cornered by who?" "Everyone," he said. "The mortgage lenders, the IRS, the creditors, the IRS." I asked, "We owe back taxes," my mother whispered. "A lot. They were threatening to put a lien on the house. We just needed a bridge." "So you used me as a bridge?" I asked. "You used my credit score as a plank to walk over. We intended to pay it back," my father insisted. "We have a deal closing next month. A consulting gig. It would have covered everything. And if it didn't," I asked. "It would have," he said. "And besides, look, Claire, let's be realistic. Elliot is 82. He has assets sitting there doing nothing. That house on the lake, the investment accounts, it is all going to come to us eventually." I stared at him. The naked entitlement was breathtaking. "So you decided to advance your inheritance?" I asked. "We are the family," he said. "It is all one pot. We just needed access to our share a little early. We knew Elliot wouldn't understand. He's too old-fashioned. He sits on his money like a dragon. We needed to circulate it." "Circulate it," I repeated. "You mean spend it." "We mean save us," my mother said, tears welling up in her eyes. "We are drowning. Claire, we are going to lose the house. We are going to lose the club membership. We are going to be humiliated." I looked at them. I really looked at them. They were terrified, not of jail, not of losing me. They were terrified of losing their status. They were terrified of being ordinary. They were terrified of the consequences of their own math. And they had been willing to sacrifice me, my financial future, my medical autonomy, my sanity to keep their facade alive for a few more months. I opened the folder. I pulled out the police report. "This is the case number." I said. My father went white. "You actually did it." I did. "And I have retained Robert Vance to contest the petition against Grandpa. If you proceed with the competency hearing, we will introduce the evidence of your financial coercion. We will show the court that you are attacking his capacity solely to cover your debts. You are ruining us," my father whispered. "You are destroying this family." I looked him in the eye. "There wasn't a family," I said quietly. "There was an arrangement. You fed me, and I gave you a prop to brag about, but the contract is void." I stood up. My chest ached, a sharp, rhythmic thumping against the new device. I expected Elliot's assets to belong to the family anyway. My father muttered, almost to himself, "It was practically ours." I looked down at him. "You mean, belong to you?" I said. I turned and walked away. I walked out of the cafe and into the rain. Elliot's Buick was idling at the curb. I got in. "How did it go?" he asked. I looked at the courthouse across the street. It was gray and imposing. "They admitted it," I said. "They said they were waiting for you to die so they could pay their taxes." Elliot gripped the steering wheel. His knuckles were white. "Let's go home," he said. We drove back to the lake. I touched the bandage on my chest. I felt the hard plastic lump of the pacemaker under my skin. It was foreign, but it was keeping the rhythm. I had a mechanical heart now, and strangely, it felt more human than the people I had just left behind. The days following the surgery were measured not in hours, but in forms. I sat at Elliot's dining room table, a heating pad draped over my left shoulder, surrounded by a fortress of paper. The process of reclaiming a stolen identity is not dramatic. It is tedious. It is a slow, grinding friction against the machinery of bureaucracy. I had to file an affidavit with the Federal Trade Commission. I had to notarize a dispute letter for the credit bureaus. I had to fill out a fraud packet for the bank, listing every unauthorized transaction, every micro-deposit, every attempt to siphon my life into my parents' pockets. It was humiliating to write it all down. On May 20th, my father, David Coleman, attempted to secure a loan using my Social Security number. On May 21st, unauthorized access was detected. Each sentence felt like a betrayal of the biological imperative to protect your own kin. But as the stack of finished paperwork grew, I felt something else, something unexpected relief. For years, my relationship with my parents had been a fog of half-truths and emotional redirection. If I said they were spending too much, they told me I was stingy. If I said they were late, they told me I was rigid. They had always controlled the narrative because the narrative was spoken, fluid, and easily denied. But an affidavit is not fluid. A police report number is not a matter of opinion. For the first time in my life, I had a paper trail that didn't gaslight me. The ink didn't change its mind when I looked at it. The timestamps didn't accuse me of being dramatic. The reality of their theft was printed in black and white, and it was the most grounding thing I had ever experienced. Robert Vance, Elliot's attorney, was moving with the aggressive efficiency of a man who despised bullies. 2 days after I filed my police report, he filed an emergency response to the capacity petition my parents had lodged against Elliot. He didn't just deny their claims, he incinerated them. He attached my sworn statement, a 3-page document where I detailed my mental clarity, my voluntary decision to recover at Elliot's home, and the specific conversation where my father had admitted the petition was a tool to gain leverage. Vance argued that the petitioners were not acting in the interest of the respondent, but were engaging in predatory litigation to conceal their own financial malfeasance. It was a declaration of war, and my parents fired back immediately. The escalation didn't come through the lawyers, it came through the family grapevine. It started with a text from my cousin Sarah, who lived in Ohio, and whom I hadn't spoken to since Christmas. "Claire, I heard about your breakdown. I am so sorry. Aunt Linda says you are really struggling. Please don't let Elliot confuse you. You know how he gets." Then a voicemail from my father's sister. "Aunt Beatrice. Claire, honey, we are all praying for you. Your mom is beside herself. She says you are refusing to see them because of some paranoia about the bank accounts. It is a side effect of the heart medication. Sweetie, just let them in. They love you. They were spinning a narrative." In their version of the story, I was the tragic, unstable daughter who had suffered a psychotic break after a medical trauma. Elliot was the manipulative, senile patriarch taking advantage of my vulnerable state to turn me against my loving parents. It was brilliant, in a sick way. It used the truth, my collapse, my heart condition, to sell the lie. That afternoon, I hit a low that felt deeper than the floor of the graduation stage. I lay on the guest bed, staring at the ceiling fan. The doubt crept in like a cold draft. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe I had misunderstood the loan application. Maybe they really did intend to pay it back. They were my parents. They had taught me to ride a bike. They had sat in the front row of my high school plays. Was I really going to send them to prison over money? Was I really going to stand in a court of law and call my father a thief? The guilt was a physical weight. Pressing down on my new pacemaker, I felt like a monster. I felt like the ungrateful child they accused me of being. I replayed memories of family vacations, filtering them through a lens of nostalgia, wondering if I was rewriting history to justify my cruelty. I walked out to the kitchen, my eyes red from crying. Elliot was there, sorting through a new stack of mail that had just arrived. He looked at me, taking in my blotchy face and slumped shoulders. "You are wavering," he said gently. "I feel like I'm crazy." "Grandpa," I confessed, "they are telling everyone I'm unstable. Maybe I am. Maybe I should just drop it. Maybe we can just fix it privately." Elliot didn't argue. He didn't tell me I was wrong. Instead, he picked up a piece of paper from the pile he was sorting. "Come here," he said. I walked over. "What is this?" he asked, handing me a document. It was a property tax notice from the county. Second notice, past due, penalty applied. "It is a tax bill," I said. "You missed a payment." "I never miss a payment," Elliot said. "I have paid my property taxes on the first of the month for 40 years, but I didn't get the first notice." He handed me another piece of paper. This one was a letter from the tax assessor's office, confirming a change of address request that had been filed 3 months ago. The address had been changed to P.O. Box 449, the same P.O. box on my insurance forms, the same P.O. box my parents used. They redirected my tax bills, Elliot said, his voice trembling with a quiet fury. They deliberately hid the notices so I would miss the payment. Why, I asked. It doesn't make sense. If they want your money, why make you pay penalties? Because unpaid taxes are a sign of cognitive decline. Elliot said, it is evidence. They wanted to be able to stand in front of a judge and say, look, Your Honor, he can't even manage his basic bills anymore. He is forgetting things. He is a risk to himself. I stared at the paper. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't a desperate scramble for cash. This was a trap. They had planted this landmine months ago, waiting for it to explode so they could use the shrapnel to prove he was incompetent. The doubt in my chest evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They aren't just desperate, I whispered. They are malicious. They are hunting, Elliot corrected. And they don't care if they have to cripple us to catch us. My phone rang. It was Robert Vance. I put it on speaker so Elliot could hear. We have a development, Vance said. His voice sounded energized. What kind of development? I asked. A witness, Vance said. I just got a call from a woman named Jessica Miller. She's a branch manager at Harbor and Field Credit Union. Harbor and Field, Elliot asked. I don't bank there. I know, Vance said. But apparently, your son does. Or at least, he tried to, Vance explained. Ms. Miller read about the petition filing in the legal notices section of the paper Small Towns. You know, and she recognized the names. 2 weeks ago, David and Linda Coleman came into her branch. They wanted to open a new joint account. Okay, I said, that isn't illegal. They wanted to add a third signer. Vance said, you, me. They had a power of attorney document with your name on it. Vance said, Ms. Miller said it looked off. The notary stamp was smudged, and the date was from 3 years ago. She told them she needed to verify the document with the principal you before she could add you to the account. What did they do? Elliot asked. They got aggressive, Vance said. David started shouting that it was a valid legal instrument and that they were in a hurry. He threatened to call the corporate office. Ms. Miller stood her ground. She said she would be happy to call you right then and there to confirm. And they left, Vance said. They grabbed the papers and walked out. Ms. Miller filed a suspicious activity report. She is willing to testify. I leaned against the counter. They tried to use a fake power of attorney to open a bank account in my name 2 weeks before graduation, while I was studying for finals, while I was working overtime. This destroys their narrative, Vance said. This proves a pattern of premeditated fraud. It proves they were trying to gain control of Claire's assets long before any medical episode. It proves the capacity petition against Elliot is just the endgame of a long con. I looked at Elliot. He looked vindicated, but also deeply sad. It is a terrible thing to be right about your own child being a predator. We have them, Elliot said softly. We do. Vance agreed, and I think they know it, because their lawyer just called me. They want to mediate. Mediation, I asked. They are offering a settlement, Vance said. They want to meet tomorrow. Not in person via video conference. They claim they want to lower the temperature. I looked at the stack of fraud affidavits on the table. Let's hear what they have to say. I said. The mediation took place the next morning. We sat in Elliot's living room, the laptop propped up on a stack of encyclopedias. Robert Vance was on the screen in a separate window. Sitting in his office, my parents and their lawyer, Arthur Penn. The smooth voice from the phone were in another window. They were sitting in their living room. I could see the expensive art on the walls behind them, art that was probably bought with money they didn't have. My mother looked tired. Her eyes were puffy. My father looked tight, his jaw clenched. Let's begin, Arthur Penn said. His voice was oily. We are here to find a family solution to a family problem. We believe that litigation is unnecessary and damaging to everyone's reputation. Cut to the chase. Arthur, Vance said. What is the offer? Penn cleared his throat. David and Linda are willing to withdraw the petition for guardianship over Elliot, he said. They are willing to acknowledge that he currently retains capacity. Currently, Vance noted. Go on. In exchange, Penn said, they request that Elliot agree to a structured family support plan, given the complexities of the estate. They propose a monthly stipend of $5,000 to cover their living expenses and assist with the management of family properties. I made a sound that was half laugh, half choke. They wanted an allowance. They wanted to be paid for stopping their attack and regarding Claire. Penn continued, looking at the camera, they are willing to overlook the unfortunate accusations she has made. They understand she is under duress. If Claire signs a statement retracting the fraud claims and withdrawing the police report, they will agree not to pursue any guardianship over her medical care. They will let her recover in peace. The room was silent. I stared at the pixelated faces of my parents. They were offering me peace. They were offering to stop trying to control me, to stop calling me crazy, to stop trying to steal my life, but only if I lied for them, only if I said the theft never happened, only if I let them keep their dignity while I swallowed the jagged glass of their betrayal. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. For a split second, I thought about it. I could just sign the paper. The noise would stop. The phone calls from relatives would stop. I could go back to my apartment. I could pretend none of this happened. I could have my family back, or at least the version of the family I had pretended to have for 30 years. Peace, quiet, normalcy. Then I remembered the feeling of the stage rushing up to meet me. I remembered the darkness. I remembered waking up in the hospital room, the lights humming, the fear tasting like copper in my mouth. I remembered looking at the empty chairs. I remembered the silence of the phone, the silence of the voicemail, the silence of the people who were supposed to catch me. If I signed their paper, I would be buying that silence. I would be paying for it with my integrity. I would be paying for it with my reality. Peace that costs you your reality isn't peace. It is submission. I leaned forward toward the laptop microphone. No. I said, Claire, be reasonable. My father said. His voice was a warning. I am being reasonable. I said, I am being the most reasonable person here. You committed crimes. You forged my signature. You tried to gaslight my grandfather into a nursing home. You redirected his mail to manufacture evidence. We are offering you a way out, my father shouted. You are offering me a gag order, I shouted back. I will not sign it. I will not retract the police report. The fraud happened. It is real, and I'm not going to help you hide it anymore. And as for the stipend, Elliot's voice cut in. It was low, deep, and absolutely final. He leaned into the frame. I will not pay you $5,000 a month, Elliot said. I will not pay you 5 cents. You are not entitled to my money because you failed to manage your own. Elliot, think about the legacy. Penn tried to interject. The legacy is right here, Elliot said, pointing at me. The legacy is the person who showed up. The legacy is the truth. We are done here, Vance said. We will see you in court. He ended the call. The screen went black. The silence in the living room was heavy. But it wasn't empty. It was vibrating with adrenaline. Elliot closed the laptop. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the lake. The water was choppy, gray waves slapping against the dock. I have a contingency plan, he said without turning around. What kind of plan? I asked. I set it up years ago, after your grandmother died. He said, but I never funded it. I never wanted to use it. I thought it was too harsh. I thought family was family. He turned to face me. It is a dynasty trust, he said, an irrevocable trust structure. If I sign the assets over to it, I lose direct ownership. I become a beneficiary. And so do you. But the control is vested in a corporate trustee, a bank. What does that mean? I asked. It means the money is locked, Elliot said. It means no one can touch it. Not me, not you, and certainly not them. It protects the assets from creditors, from lawsuits, and from family members who think they are entitled to a payout. He took a breath. If I execute this trust, Claire, it cuts them off permanently. There is no allowance. There is no inheritance. When I die, the income goes to you, and the principal stays locked. They get nothing. Zero. He looked at me with an intensity that made me shiver. It is a nuclear option, he said. It will permanently fracture the family. They will never forgive us. They will hate us for the rest of their lives. There will be no Christmas dinners, no reconciliations. We will be the villains in their story forever. He walked over and sat down across from me. I can do it, he said. I am ready to do it. But I need to know if you can handle it. He asked the question that hung in the air like smoke. What can you live with? Claire. Can you live with the noise? Can you live with being the reason they lose everything? I looked at my grandfather. I looked at the man who had slept in a chair in my hospital room. I looked at the man who had brought me water and crossword puzzles while my parents were looking for witnesses to sign fake documents. I thought about the family I was losing. A family that saw me as a credit score. A family that saw him as a bank account. I realized I wasn't losing a family. I was losing a captor. I looked at the stack of fraud reports. I can live with being disliked, I said, my voice steady. Elliot nodded. Waiting. I can't live with being used. I finished. Elliot let out a long breath, his shoulders dropping as if a heavy pack had been removed. Okay, he said. Then we do it. He reached for the phone and called Vance. Execute the trust, Elliot said. Move the house, move the accounts, lock it down. He hung up. The sun was setting over the lake, casting long shadows across the room. We sat there in the gathering dark, two people who had just burned down the only bridge back to the past. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the court system, forwarded by Vance's paralegal. Notice of hearing, case number 24-CV-0991, matter of Elliot J. Coleman, date June 15th, location Ridgeway County Courthouse. It was set, public, official, unavoidable. I touched the scar on my chest. My heart beat steadily, a mechanical rhythm keeping time in the silence. I was ready. The morning of the hearing, the sky over Ridgeway County was a flat, slate gray, threatening rain that never seemed to break. I stood in front of the mirror in the guest bathroom of Elliot's house, adjusting the collar of my blouse. It was a high-necked silk shirt, chosen specifically to cover the lump of the pacemaker and the fading bruise of the incision. I looked different. I was thinner, my cheekbones casting sharper shadows than they had a month ago. My skin had the translucent quality of someone who has spent too much time indoors healing. But my eyes were different. They weren't the panicked, seeking eyes of the girl scanning the graduation crowd. They were still. Elliot waited for me by the front door. He was wearing his best navy suit, the one he had worn to my grandmother's funeral. He had polished his shoes until they looked like black glass. Are you ready? He asked. I picked up the heavy file box containing 3 weeks of agonizing documentation. No, I said honestly, but let's go anyway. The Ridgeway County Courthouse was a relic of the 19th century, all stone pillars and echoing marble hallways that smelled of floor wax and old judgments. We walked up the wide steps, Elliot moving a little slower than usual, his hand resting lightly on my elbow not to support him, but to steady me. We saw them as soon as we entered the courtroom. My parents were sitting at the plaintiff's table. They looked immaculate. My father was in a charcoal suit that signaled quiet authority, and my mother wore a soft, cream-colored cardigan that made her look maternal and non-threatening. They were holding hands, to a stranger. They looked like the very picture of loving, concerned parents forced into a difficult position by a tragedy. They saw me. My mother's face crumpled into a mask of tragic relief. She made a move to stand up, reaching her arms out across the aisle. Claire, she whispered loudly. Oh, honey, look at you. You are so thin. I didn't stop. I didn't look at her. I walked past them and sat next to Robert Vance at the defendant's table. Ms. Coleman, Vance said, nodding at me. He looked ready. He had the energy of a coiled spring. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Helena Ross entered. She was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose and an expression that suggested she had very little patience for nonsense. This is the matter of the petition for adjudication of incompetence regarding Elliot J. H. Coleman. She read, "Let's proceed. Arthur Penn." My parents' lawyer stood up. He buttoned his jacket and adopted a tone of sorrowful necessity. "Your Honor," he began, "this is a painful day for the Coleman family. David and Linda are here not out of malice, but out of a desperate need to protect their father and their daughter." He gestured toward us. "Mr. Coleman is 82 years old. In recent weeks, his behavior has become erratic, paranoid, and aggressive. He removed his granddaughter, Claire, from critical hospital care against medical advice. He has isolated her at his home in the woods. He has cut off contact with her parents." Penn lowered his voice, leaning toward the judge. "Claire Coleman recently suffered a traumatic cardiac event. She collapsed publicly. She is currently recovering from surgery. We believe her judgment is compromised, and she is being unduly influenced by a grandfather who is no longer capable of managing his own affairs, let alone the medical needs of a fragile young woman. We are simply asking the court to appoint David Coleman as guardian to ensure everyone's safety." It was a good story. It was consistent. It played on every prejudice about age and medical vulnerability. Judge Ross looked at Elliot. Then she looked at me. "Mr. Vance," she said. Vance didn't make a speech. He stood up and picked up a single piece of paper. "Your Honor," he said, his voice gravelly and unimpressed. "The petitioners claim this is a matter of capacity. We assert that this is a matter of robbery." He walked to the bench and handed the paper to the clerk. "The narrative you just heard is a fabrication designed to cover a systematic attempt to defraud both the respondent and the witness," Vance said. "This is not a family conflict. It is a pattern of control." He began to lay out the bricks of the wall we had built. "Exhibit A," Vance said. "An application for an auto loan from Pine Ledger Finance, dated May 20th. The applicant is Claire Coleman. The signature is a forgery. The IP address traces back to the petitioner's home." He handed over the document. I saw my father stiffen. "Exhibit B," Vance continued. "A change of address form filed with the county tax assessor 3 months ago, redirecting Elliot Coleman's property tax notices to a P.O. box registered to David Coleman. This resulted in late fees, which the petitioners now cite as evidence of Mr. Coleman's forgetfulness." My mother let go of my father's hand. She was staring at the table. "Exhibit C," Vance said, his voice rising slightly. "A sworn affidavit from Jessica Miller, branch manager at Harbor and Field Credit Union. She testifies that on May 10th, the petitioners attempted to add Claire Coleman to a joint account using a fraudulent power of attorney. When challenged, they fled the bank. Exhibit D," Vance finished, dropping the final document on the clerk's desk with a heavy thud. "A police report filed by Claire Coleman against her parents for identity theft." The courtroom was silent. The air had changed. The concerned family narrative was evaporating, replaced by the cold, hard scent of criminal intent. Judge Ross picked up the loan application. She studied it over the rim of her glasses. Then she looked at my father. "Mr. Coleman," she said, "did you apply for a high-interest auto loan in your daughter's name 3 days before she graduated?" My father stood up. He looked flustered. "Your Honor, it was a leverage strategy," he stammered. "We were managing family cash flow. Claire would have been informed. It was a technicality." "A technicality," the judge repeated flatly. "Forging a signature is not a technicality. Mr. Coleman, it is a felony." She turned back to Vance. "Call your first witness. I call Elliot Coleman," Vance said. Elliot stood up. He walked to the witness stand with a steady, measured gait. He took the oath. He sat down and adjusted his suit jacket. "Mr. Coleman," Vance asked, "why did you go to Cedar Mercy Hospital on the day of Claire's collapse?" "Because they called me," Elliot said. His voice was clear. It carried to the back of the room without a microphone. "They called me because no one else answered." "Did you remove Claire against medical advice?" "I removed her from a stressful environment where she was being harassed by creditors and neglected by her parents." Elliot said, I took her to my home. I fed her. I took her to her surgery. Why have you refused to sign the management documents your son presented to you? Vance asked. Elliot looked directly at my father. My father looked away. Because I worked for 40 years as a structural engineer. Elliot said, I know the difference between a support beam and a demolition charge. My son does not want to manage my assets. He wants to liquidate them to pay for a lifestyle he cannot afford. I refuse to sign because I am a father, not an ATM. The simplicity of it was devastating. There was no anger in his voice, just a profound disappointment that resonated off the marble walls. Vance sat down. Mr. Penn, the judge asked, do you have questions for the witness? Penn looked at his clients. He looked at the judge. He looked at Elliot, who was watching him with blue eyes that looked like granite. No questions. Your Honor, Penn muttered, call your next witness. The judge said, I call Claire Coleman. Vance said, I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my head was clear. I walked to the stand. I sat down and placed my hands on my lap to stop them from shaking. Ms. Coleman, Vance asked, the petitioners claim you are emotionally unstable and acting under the undue influence of your grandfather. Is this true? No. I said, can you tell the court why your parents did not arrive at the hospital until 3 days after your collapse? Penn stood up. Objection. Relevance. Overruled. Judge Ross said sharply, I want to hear the answer. I looked at my parents. My mother was crying now. A soft, weeping sound that I used to rush to comfort. Now, it just sounded like noise. I don't know why they didn't come. I said, I called them. The doctors called them. I lay there for 3 days waiting for them. I paused. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the ventilation system. I don't know where they were. I said, but I know who did show up. I know who sat in the chair. I know who learned the names of my medications. I looked at Elliot. My grandfather didn't influence me. I said, he saved me. Judge Ross nodded slowly. She turned her gaze to my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Coleman, she said, I have some questions. My father stood up again. He was sweating now. A sheen of perspiration on his forehead shone in the harsh court lights. You claim you were concerned about your daughter's health, the judge said. Yet the evidence shows that while she was in the cardiac unit, you were attempting to access her credit file. Can you explain the timing? We were trying to secure resources for her care. My father lied. His voice cracked. We knew the medical bills would be high. We were being proactive by taking out a loan with an 18% interest rate, the judge asked, from a subprime lender. It was a temporary measure, my father insisted. We were going to refinance the house. Which house, the judge asked, looking at a document in her hand. The house that is currently 3 months behind on its mortgage, or the house that belongs to your father, which you tried to gain control over through this petition. My father opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The web was too tight. Every time he moved, he stuck himself to another lie. And Mrs. Coleman, the judge said, turning to my mother, you called the hospital pretending to be your daughter to get her records. My mother stood up. She looked small and terrified. I just wanted to know if she was okay. She wailed. They wouldn't tell me anything. I am her mother. You are her mother, the judge said, her voice dropping to a dangerous chill. But according to this affidavit from the hospital billing department, you didn't ask about her condition. You asked for her discharge papers and her insurance authorization code. That is not maternal concern. Mrs. Coleman, that is data mining. My mother sat down, burying her face in her hands. The judge stacked the papers on her desk. She took off her reading glasses. I have heard enough, she said. She looked out over the courtroom. The petition for adjudication of incompetence is dismissed with prejudice. She ruled, I find no evidence that Elliot Coleman is incapacitated. In fact, he appears to be the only person in this family acting with any degree of responsibility. She paused. Furthermore, regarding the evidence of fraud, forgery, and identity theft presented by the defense, I am referring this entire file to the district attorney's office for review. The suspicious activity regarding the bank accounts and the loan application warrants a criminal investigation. My father gasped. It was a sharp, Sucking sound. "The court is adjourned," the judge said. She banged the gavel. It wasn't a cheer. It wasn't a celebration. It was just a stopping. The noise stopped. The threat stopped. I sat there for a moment, feeling the vibration of the gavel strike in my bones. It was over. Vance turned to me and smiled. A rare, genuine expression. "You did it, Claire," he said. "You held the line." We walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was crowded with people waiting for the next session, but the space around us felt empty. My parents were waiting near the exit. They couldn't leave without passing us. My father's face was red, mottled with rage and humiliation. My mother was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks. "You happy now?" My father hissed as we approached. He didn't shout. He whispered, which made it worse. "You happy? You just sent a criminal referral on your own parents. You committed the crime. Dad," I said, "I just reported it. You ruined this family." He said. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "We are going to lose everything. The house, the reputation, everything. And it is your fault, because you couldn't just keep your mouth shut and help us." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had raised me, the man who had taught me to tie my shoes, the man who had sold my safety to buy himself a little more time. I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't anger, it was pity. He was so small. He was so terrified of the world seeing him as he was, that he had burned down his own home to create a smokescreen. There wasn't a family. "Dad," I said calmly. He blinked. "There was an arrangement." I said, "You pretended to be parents, and I pretended to be an asset. But the arrangement is over." I turned to my mother. "I hope you figure it out." "Mom," I said, "I really do, but you are going to have to do it without my credit score." I walked past them. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors and stepped out into the daylight. The rain had stopped. The pavement was wet and black, reflecting the gray sky, but the air was fresh. Elliot was standing by a concrete planter, waiting for me. He watched my parents exit the building behind me. They didn't look at us. They hurried down the steps to their leased luxury car, two people running from a reality that had finally caught them. Elliot watched them go. He didn't look triumphant. He looked like a man who had just survived a shipwreck. He turned to me and reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a thick, sealed envelope. "Here," he said. "What is this?" I asked. "It is the trust documents," he said, "and the new healthcare proxy, and the power of attorney." He paused. "And a letter." He added, "A letter I wrote it last night." He said, in case I didn't get to say what I needed to say in there." I took the envelope. It felt heavy, like the notebook he had brought to the hospital. I opened it right there on the sidewalk. I pulled out the letter. It was written in his blocky, engineer's handwriting. I read the first paragraph. "Dear Claire, they will tell you that family is about blood. They will tell you that loyalty means suffering together. They are wrong. Family is about who sits in the chair. It is about who answers the phone. It is about who brings the water. I am 82 years old, and I have learned that you cannot save people who are determined to drown. You can only save the ones who are reaching for the shore. I am signing everything over to the trust today, not to punish them, but to protect you. I am choosing the future over the past, and I will not apologize for choosing the person who showed up. Love, Grandpa." I looked up. The tears finally came, hot and fast, blurring my vision. Elliot reached out and pulled me into a hug. He smelled of Old Spice and cedar wood and rain. He felt solid. He felt like a foundation that wouldn't crack. "Let's go home, Claire," he said. We walked down the steps together. My chest ached, the pacemaker humming against my ribs, keeping the rhythm, keeping time. I had lost the parents I thought I had. I had lost the illusion of the perfect family. I had lost the apartment and the timeline and the plan. But as I got into the old Buick and watched my grandfather start the engine, I realized I had found something else. I had found the truth. And for the first time in 33 years, my heart was beating on its own terms. Thank you so much for listening to Claire and Elliot's story. Writing this journey of betrayal and vindication has been an emotional ride, and I hope it resonated with you. It's a hard truth that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones we need protection from. But there is always hope in the people who do show up. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from in the world. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories so you don't miss the next one. And please, share your thoughts in the comments in English. I read every single one of them. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember to value the people who sit in the chair.